I'll go live as soon as you do. Okay. Masinamkeleke nonke kwindawo ngendawo enisibukele kuzo nabakhoyo phakathi kwethu. We welcome you from wherever you're watching us. Welcome to our very first live show at Kilombo TV. And so we are going to spend the next few minutes in conversation with the one and only Miselwa Moza. I almost said James, but Mzanywa. We'll go back to James, when you were James. Yeah, we'll go back there. Salam Geleketokhana, and we are looking forward to this conversation. We are glad you have chosen to be with us. It's a very rich story that deserves to be told, deserves to be archived. We are in conversation with you, but we are also in conversation with future generations. We are in conversation with our children who are going to grow up and interact with this story. So stay with us and do write your comments on the comment section. We'll take time and read those comments. And so I see 4 sections to this conversation, just so that everybody is on board. I see 4 sections. We'll cover the story of way of life, and it will be in 4 sections. We'll take it from 1996, September, when the church was launched, up to 2000 with the arrival of Moza. Then together we are going to reminisce and reflect on those 14 years that Moza spent at Way of Life. Then we are going to go to our 3rd section, what happened since the time Moza left, which then of course takes us to the transition from Way of Life to Kilombo. As we close our conversation, we'll go into that most delicate part of our history, how every one of us were impacted by the transition, wounded, formed, deformed by that transition. And so we come into this conversation with open hearts. We hope to learn from this history, and so let's see where we go with this conversation. I welcome now Moza, Miselwa, Mzanywa. Moza, welcome, and thank you so very much. Beautiful as ever, with your trademark hairstyle. Moza, welcome to Kilombo TV, but more importantly, welcome home. You are not a former member. There's no such a thing as a former member in the family. Family is always family. And so thank you for opening yourself up to this very sensitive conversation. And I know it will inspire a whole lot of other people to come forward and share their experience at Way of Life, outside Way of Life, and so we can see what kind of lessons are there for us to learn.
Thank you so much, Mfundisi, for inviting me. It really, really feels great to walk in here and, being back at home brings so many great memories. And I really, really am honored that you invited me to come and have this true and honest conversation where we can actually find each other.
Yeah.
And I know in conversations, Zetu, we always find ourselves in that space. Wherever we go, we always find each other. And I'm grateful and I'm thankful that you picked up that call and you extended this invitation to me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Moza, I didn't think it was going to be this emotional. Okay? For some reason now, the whole atmosphere is changed, in a good way, flooded with emotion, flooded with memory.
Yeah.
But it's a necessary conversation.
Absolutely, Mfundisi. Couldn't agree more with you.
So let's start. In 1996, September of that year, in a small classroom, a group of young people, less than 20, I think, Abekailecha, Elukolweni Primary, had this crazy idea that they could call themselves a church. And so we invited leadership as a Way of Life from Port Elizabeth. 3 people came over that weekend, and one of them has since passed. May his soul rest in peace. Umfundisi uThobile Dagga. Sesazwa nje wangumfundisi uSonjika.
Okay.
Left his wife and children, COVID. So he was part of that launch. Funsukacha himself came, and my childhood friend, Mulelo Makubalo, Ubele, he was here. So, even as I say this now, I see faces of young people who were there, and one that comes to mind now, Notemba Desi.
Ah, man. Yes.
Just around the corner from Aposa Sikona, and then of course, this is 1996, 1997. I was doing my honors at UWC in 1996. I preached some of my best sermons in that classroom. In fact, spoke above the heads of children. Those were children at the time. Or Unati, Ontnodumo, Olwando. I remember one of my sermons was titled The Dynamics of Global Economy.
Oh my goodness.
This was 1996. Had a chalk in hand. I was on that board breaking down, globalization to children. And they put up with me, preached some of my best sermons there. We had immediately then Moza realized that there's no shortage of churches. So if we're going to be a church, we will have to be different. We must be able to make a significant, meaningful contribution. And so we experimented with community development. Right from day one, Lunga Salahamtu from Port Elizabeth came to assist us. We had our first fun run, which was supposed to be an awareness campaign on the issue of rape, HIV and AIDS. This is already 1997, 96, 97. Xola Skosana, remember her? This is,
So Mfundisi, early on, it seems as though you were kind of ahead of your time in terms of the kind of preaching, you were sharing with these young people. And I'm pretty sure at that time, ingonzo ezininzi zazinga preachy. they were not looking at church from a community perspective. Addressing the issues that affect young people at that time. And that was kind of the focus that you had, and you wanted to plant so much in these young kids, early on.
Well, Moza, let me just put it this way. And I'm not going to mention names, but we had a tragic situation. A young girl got raped by her uncle.
Okay.
And she was a member of our church. I never felt so helpless. I did not know what do you do when somebody comes to you and they say to you, my uncle raped me. I never felt so helpless. Do you go to the police? Do you go to social worker? This was 1996. And so right there and then we had to answer the question of the relevance of the gospel in communities such as ours. So I think we were responding to our pain, and we wanted Jesus to speak to that pain. And so we began reading the Bible with those eyes. What does Jesus say to a girl who's been raped by her uncle? And so before we left that classroom, we experimented with coffee bars on a Friday.
I remember those days.
On a Friday, I think this is now 1998, 99. We said, well, we can't spend all of our lives in this classroom. We've got to touch the lives of young people in this community. But how do we bridge the gap between church and community? So we experimented with coffee bars. This is now 1998, 99. And we went into the homes of some of our church members on a Friday, and we bought coffee and sugar. Now, I have a background in youth development, so I brought all the games, indoor games that we could play. I was much younger than Moza, so I could run around. And young people came.
Wow.
But these were young, beautiful people. And so they could invite these boys. These were boys at the time. And so these boys could not resist the invitation from these beautiful girls.
So abasa coffee bar.
I know. Babebizwa ngabafana, ngabantwana bangamantombazana, and many of them came from one section, the L section, eKhayelitsha. Abu Yibanati, may his soul rest in peace. Yes. Abu, oh come on. Abu Zokolo, Abu family Ndwebi, Ostelo, Olubabalo. Young people responded, and they joined this family. In 1999. Now, here is a moment before we come to your arrival in 2000. Significant moment. I think now, perhaps this is the time when I become very ambitious. And so I remember stopping our worship in the middle of the service. And I stopped everybody. I said, stop singing, stop praying. And so they stopped, I could do that then, because these were kids, these were young people. In fact, nobody called me pastor then, Moza. Everybody was a bit called. Yeah, Shumela Nubu short. So here is a significant moment, Moza. I stopped that service in the middle of singing, and I said to everybody, follow me. So I walked out of that classroom into a very busy section of eKhayelitsha. It's a sort of CBD, Central Business District of sort, Side B Mall or Side B Center. So we're walking quietly, and we got there, we sat down, and I said to them, please just find a place and sit down. In the middle of a busy, people were busy. went to buy groceries or whatever they do there, but siniki nje sabantu. So I asked them a question. I said, what do you see? And then, of course, they thought it was a tricky question. They didn't want to answer that. I said, no, it's not a tricky question. Just open your eyes, tell me, what do you see? And the answer came, we see people. They didn't say black people, but they said, we see people. Later on, of course, in our theology, you would know that we began to understand the story of black people.
So that was the beginning of your contextual gospel.
Contextual theology.
Absolutely.
So I said, well, our singing in that classroom and our praying in that classroom has nothing to do with these people. They are trying to survive. They're using whatever little money they have on the only day of the week that they don't have to go to work to try and resolve issues of their lives, to buy groceries, to visit families. For the rest of the week up to Saturday, they must go to the plantation. Yeah. So how do we touch the lives of these people if we are going to lock ourselves
in that classroom?
And who of these people would leave their broken homes, broken lives, to come and meet a God who's all-powerful in a broken classroom? You know?
Yeah.
So the idea of public theology, if you like, began then. We said, okay, we can no longer stay in this classroom. If we have something to offer to this community, let's find a platform, a public platform. Somebody from home must be able to say, I'm leaving my house, my broken home. I'm going to look for this big God in a big place, place that's bigger than my home. Mm-hmm. So, sayongongoza municipality. Safumana resource center and moved into that community hall, not as a church, but as a service provider.
Yeah.
With a very clear, broken down, and of course, we'll talk about how our vision was formed. But we moved from that classroom at the end of December, end of October 1999, and transitioned to the community hall, to a public space, because we felt we had something to offer. Now, Moza arrives. I think there was a man by the name Samkelo Blom.
Yes.
Who was already part of our church at the time. He lived at Summer Greens together, your neighbor or your friend or something. Mm-hmm. So take it from there, Moza.
All right. This is 2000, and I think at that time, my family and I were looking for churches. And obviously, we were staying at Summer Greens, and we're looking for churches around Koma Edgemead and all the surrounding areas. But what was strange was that we just could not connect to a church. And at that time, it happened, Ukuti, I had this friend, Samkelo, and he had a friend that had come over from Ebai. It was actually that friend that had invited Sam to Enkonzweni, a way of life.
All right.
So Sam said, look, let's come along with me.
Sorry to disturb you, Moza. I think what I'll do, there are people who are watching us live, and some of them are beginning to write comments. I think we must honor that and read some of those comments. So we have a whole lot of people here. Mfundisi Kupela was Methodist Church is also a friend of mine is watching. We've got, of course, my wife, Ndumi. Yeah. She's watching. We've got Tutuzeli, Lulega Slu, Flatela, Kweta, up at Johannesburg.
Wow.
She's watching us. We've got AJ, Jange Lubabalo is watching. Kaile Tukasta Zetu, Zatu. Yeah.
Castes.
Bishop Tabiso Eric Titipane is here in Kailicha, one of the leaders in the fraternal here is watching. We've got Mzwanele Mhlanti, Xola Limba, Mfundisi Ewenkonzo Epaya, I think Epaglands or somewhere. He's also from Port Elizabeth.
Okay.
He's here with us, watching us. And then, of course, Nonzaba is here with us. We've got Uvyoga's Lianda, Tukwayo, Lerato Mbieza Keduma. Remember Lerato? He was a member of our churches in PE,
Yes,
paramedic
right.
in PE, yeah. Mary Sizwe, and so on. I'll keep reading just to welcome every one of them so they can feel part of this conversation. And I'll read their comments later on. So you get invited to church.
So I get invited to a Kailicha Mfundisi.
A Kailicha, yeah?
Now, I'd always known about a Kailicha, but I'd never been to a Kailicha. Because sasisuka eMonti.
Yeah.
Even though umama wami wayenguwalapha eKapa wachata notata bama bawusebenza eMonti.
I remember this story.
Bohlukana ke
Yes.
ngoku. Umama yena wagoduka utata wathi niyahlala. So sazohlala apha eKapa. Now uhlala kwethu eKapa sayohlala eForest Hill and then sayohlala eSummergrants.
That's how Gezela did Model C.
Exactly.
I remember this story.
Exactly. Now, andiyazi le Kailicha, I had never been to it, but my mother tells me about this Kailicha. It's a big township. So Sam invites me to say, come to Nkonzo Kailicha. So I go. And I remember as I stepped into a resource center at Kailicha, I knew I'd find a place where I could fit in and associate. And the reason for that, influence, is that in background, we Model C schools. We couldn't find people that we related to. So I came there with a whole big, full of young people that looked like me. And right there, I found a place where I could belong. And it felt so welcoming, you know?
Yeah, because I remember, sorry to interject, Kumbula Dibuza Maya, in one of our meetings, what brings you to this church?
Connecting.
That's the word he came out. He says, connection.
Connection for this, absolutely. It's exactly what happened to me.
Take us through that 14 years, Moza.
And
what experience?
At this time, Mfundisi andisindiswanga andimazi uKristu kuthethwa ngaye. And I remember then the second Sunday, there was visitors from Gauteng.
Abo Dumisani Sondo.
Yes, yes. And,
Abo Myeni Kalulungo.
yes,
right?
yes. And I remember that the preaching Ngalamini, I think it was about imeko yabantu baseKailicha, the suffering yabantu baseKailicha. But for some strange reason, I don't remember really in depth, but I felt the spirit within me, you know, and I kind of knew right there, Uba, I think this is a visitation for him, you know, this is Umoya Ngcwele, and you know, and I knew right there at that moment, ndiyasindiswa. Now, andiyazi ke process ngeli xesha lenkonzo ba kuthiwa xa uzosindiswa bakuthina. I remember when I came back emotweni kuSam, sithi Sam, I think sinsiwe man, you know.
Something happened to me there.
Something happened to me during that service, you know. And obviously the third Sunday when we'd come in, and then I accepted Christ. And the amazing thing about coming into Kailicha was that I found a place where I could connected to, but the also interesting thing is that I did not know the suffering of black people in and me coming into a way of life at that time, it meant that I had to go sometimes for worship services.
Ezindlini zabantu.
Abantu babehlala ematyotyombeni babengahlali ku-forum houses. So I was introduced to Lameko, and it really got me thinking ukuthi kanti ubomi babantu bunjena. And but then for some strange reason, at the very same time, I also became an outcast because I did not know lentlalo. So every time I would make a comment about how people were living, I would immediately be told, akuyazi kaloku wena, akuhlali apha. You know, so I found myself back in the space I used to be in where I didn't necessarily fit in.
Yeah. Today we talk about the Olympics of black suffering, meaning that other blacks would claim they've suffered more than others.
Exactly. And that makes them blacker than the rest,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So you felt excluded, sort of an outsider, and you have no right to talk about.
You know?
Okay.
You know, and but kuyo yonke ke lonto leyo mfundisi, because I think inhliziyo yami yayisele ivulekile ivumele
Chumkile.
kakhulu mfundisi, you know, ifuna ukuba lapha. So I kind of opened my eyes and I wanted to learn. I wanted to know all there was there to learn. And I allowed myself sometimes to be criticized, but in that process, it opened my eyes and learned a lot about us and the suffering of black people. And
Moza,
I remember...
Yeah, sorry to interject, Moza. I just want to help you know, our viewers and so on, just to put things in perspective, because things are taking a formal shape when you arrive.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
One of those things was the articulation and sort of the conceptualization, if you like. Ukubhalwa phansi kombono was a way of life.
Absolutely.
And what we called Vision 2010 emerged.
Yes.
Instrumental people there, Phumelele Zonela,
Busimkela,
Busimkela, came to my house, Thando Mpulu, and others. These were mostly black students who were coming out of these universities who said, well, this can be done. And there's a way to do it that's effective. And so you come into that space with your talents, with your gifts. When did you become part of the leadership? Because for as long as I remember, you were always visible in the leadership and making my life difficult. Osava finance.
I was in finance, and I was actually invited by Thando Mpulu.
Okay.
To come into finance, because at that time I was at UWC doing it, becoming accounting.
Another story to be told.
It's another story, that one, Mfundisi. And so Mpulu invites me and asks me, look, would you like to be a part of our leadership team together with Uvuvu? To run the, absolutely, to run the finances at that time. And so I was like, yes, I will agree. And I remember again, ngela xesha usibalisela into yokuba imali yomnikelo yayidla ngohlala ku Skyline. Yes, Skyline.
Yes, I had a blue Skyline. Ngoku sasiseclassini offering yasithatha si beka phaya emotweni. Yeah. Phelele phaa ke Moza ungandibuza uba yayiphelela phaa kulaa moto. You know, ekuqaleni kwakhona. You know, just a quick one. Ngexesha siseclassini kwafika uDumisani Sondlo, black professional, the only black professional at the time, and he writes a check yomnikelo yezishumi. I think we end up with this check 800 rands or something, and I'm thinking, yo, you know, and so on.
I think Mfundisi, from then onwards, I think that's when things started to take shape in terms of also administration. I remember we had many different departments that we started to formalize, because I think you started to say, Uti, we need to change the way in which a church is being administered. And it is important that we have structured systems in place. So it was not just me, many other people came into significant positions and started making changes.
We spent 12 years in that community hall, from 2000 to 2012, when we moved into this auditorium. And one of the highlights for me, Moza, was, you know, I mean, we did not know everything, but we had a heart. One of the things that stands out for me is we had a study, if you like. Abo Pumi, Abo Sam, and others, many were part of that. We wanted to understand what is the condition of young people in this community, in the area of employment, in the area of health, in the area of
Finances,
education,
yes.
and then in the area of sport. So we had commissions that were sent out into the community. Were you part of those?
Not necessarily, not at that time.
Not at that time.
Not at that time.
And we came up with a document, Moza. It opened our eyes. We were not sucking up information. We knew the stats. We knew the demographics and we knew the history and we were working with tangible numbers. But we needed a team. We needed a team, and you were part of that team.
I think, emphasis, that's one of the things that at that time made me so excited about this place called Way of Life, was the hunger to want to know its people. We were preaching this gospel, but then we wanted to know who are these people that we're preaching this gospel to. Because what was important at that time was that this gospel had to make sense to them.
It had to make sense.
So in order for it to make sense, we need to know what are their struggles, what are they going through.
What are the questions that are being asked?
What are the questions exactly?
Because we didn't want to answer questions that were not being asked.
Absolutely, Mr. Mfundisi.
I mean, from where I come from, Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him, there's no other. Jesus is the way. And later on, we had to ask the question, but is an answer to what question? What is the question that black people are asking? And I think I'm raising this, Moza, because something significant in 2004, 2005. You would remember that we established an instrument called the Hope Center, through which we wanted to do community development and respond to the felt needs of our people. But something happens in 2004, 2005, and you may disagree with me, but I think our pulpit changes in 2004, 2005 with the introduction of Black Easter Conference. Would you agree with me?
I would definitely agree, but I'm just thinking, I remember we came up with the 3 pillars. Was it before and after the 3 pillars of truth, love, and justice? I think it was run about at the same time, right?
I have to dig deep now, Moza.
Because I want to think that when we started to speak about Black Easter,
the 3 things I remember, if this is what you're referring to, where if you like the formula, we said our response comes in the form of relief. It comes in the form of development, and it comes in the form of advocacy.
Yes.
That you give food, but then you also teach people to go fish for themselves.
For themselves, absolutely.
And then you fight for access to fishing waters. I don't know if you're referring to that.
I think that came on later on.
Much later on.
That was much later. But I think at that time, that was the time of the Black Easter.
The Black Easter.
When we started to say while we are preaching about the suffering of black people, we need to speak the truth about it, but we need to speak it in love. And we need to seek social justice for black people. I don't know whether you still remember, but I remember you would speak about these 3 pillars.
I'm old now, Moza.
You know, and I think at that time, that's when then we started to introduce the Black Easter. The Black Easter.
Moza,
the suffering of Jesus.
Let me make a confession now, because we must not give people the impression that it was all good. We had made many mistakes Absolutely. In the process, rubbed each other the wrong way sometimes. I was held accountable. I was not used to being told what to do, how to do it when the church began. And so when these structures were in place, suddenly I had to answer to the entire leadership on what happened to the money, what happened to it. It was very hard for me. But where I'm going, here's an example. We have raised something like 50,000 rands by 2004, 2005 for our building project. You remember that?
I remember that very well.
So I'm thinking, we've been at this thing for 10 years. We owe it to ourselves to celebrate. So why don't I call all these big shots and friends of mine around the country? We can have a moment of celebration. And so we invited Mfundisi Musa Sono, Mfundisi Don Phillips, Mfundisi Oscar Ngosi, Mfundisi Kacha.
This is 2006, right?
This is 2006, ne? September. And I went into the coffers, and I took that money, and I spent it on that celebration. I know there are people who took offense and who were very unhappy, may have left the church even at the time. Do you have any memory of that? What is your feeling about that?
I do have memories of that. I think at that time, I think what really made it easy for us to understand where you were coming at was knowing that even though we made a mistake, even though you wanted to use that money, it was for the right reason. That 10 years that you had spent growing the church at that time, we needed to say, look at what the Lord had done. And at that time, through your leadership, you said, look, there's no better way than to do this. Let's just celebrate. And obviously, I think at that time, we had never had such a big amount of money. We never thought of things like, look, let's plan and not use everything, let's just use some of it. We just wanted to go all out, and we kind of agreed to that. I don't remember much, Mfundisi, but I do remember that it did leave a bitter taste in some, people.
And I must take this time and say to those people, if they are watching today, we made mistakes, but we had good intentions.
Absolutely. There were great intentions, Mfundisi. I mean, from that 10 years, we learned so much. Mfundisi Papa was there, I want to think.
Yes.
Those were great moments that we created. We learned so much from that time. And there was no way we could have put any tag on it. And I think for many people, Mfundisi, they grew from those teachings that came out of that celebration. Kukhona abantu abafika apha enkonzweni ngela xesha, and bahlala because of that moment and because of that time. So as much as we want to go back and look at the fact that really money was spent and maybe we were a bit extravagant on your side, Mfundisi. But I
didn't buy myself any suit or anything of that sort.
Yeah,
so
but I
spent every cent on
absolutely. But I think it was money well spent.
Moza, fast forward now, the character of our church is changing. We are now we are now known as this controversial church with this controversial pastor. Jesus was HIV.
I'm thinking about that. That was the first one where everybody was saying, what is going on? What is this pastor saying?
Yeah.
How can you make uthathu Yesu umdibanise ne-HIV, into emdaka kangaka uyidibanise nomuntu ongcwele kangaka, And I think that was a time when most people's eyes started to be opened. And that's when we're really speaking about a personal Jesus, really, really digging into the issues that people were living with at that time. And HIV was an issue at that moment. And we wanted to bring people, it
was the best way to destigmatize HIV and AIDS, I mean, to this day, Moza, it's one of the best sermons that ever came out of Way of Life.
I can't agree more.
I would preach it today. I would preach it, if they were to wake me up in the middle of the night. Moza, let's wrap this section. We are going towards, I understand, a break. There's going to be a video that's going to come through. Then we are going to talk about the transition. But I want to, because you served right into the high structures of our church. You, at some stage, became an administrator, even a PA, am I right? I remember traveling somewhere in the world and you were working on some things in the office and so on.
Yes.
Can you just maybe give us a picture there? I mean, you could have gone anywhere, Moza, and you were earning 2,000 rands a month.
Yeah.
You had kids, you had a home. That's how connected you were. I mean, you laid your life down to serve us.
I think what changed it for me, Mfundisi, was I remember Pastor Jackie Bland came in.
And you fell under her arm, you were mentored
by
her.
She mentored me, and I remember we started to open up a foundation class. And I think that's when my personal relationship with Christ really grew. And I sort of had this longing of wanting to serve. And so through the teachings that I had gotten from Pastor Jackie, and I then decided, look, I want to move on from just serving on a Sunday or on a Saturday at Nkonzweni. I want to devote my time for a year up in Nkonzweni, helping the administration. So that's how that came about. I had left my work at that time, and I came. We had our fights in Mfundisi. We had a lot of fights, but the amazing thing about our fights in Mfundisi, I remember you would always say, Moza, let's agree to disagree. And we would leave it there, and we would wake up the following day, it would still be okay. And I think because the reason for that in Mfundisi was because I knew where your heart was at that time. I had no reason to doubt that even though you were doing things the way that you were doing, that it was not for the journey that we were all in. So it was okay.
I almost shed a tear now because I do remember that at one stage we sort of really pushed each other to the edge almost. And I had to go back to you several months later.
That was towards the end,
and apologize. Yes. So I'm going to just acknowledge people who are with us, and then we'll go to the break.
Yes,
okay, so we have Siviwe Kavelen. All right, we've got Ralph Alfgan. This pastor is from the Methodist Church. We did masters together at Stellenbosch.
Oh, okay.
Police Lucas Mkongo, Mami Betha, member of our church.
Oh, yes.
Mama Aka, what's her name? This beautiful young lady there. Ndombekaya ala ke Veronica Mafuduka.
Oh, yes.
Oh, man, these people. All right, so we also have Itu, brilliant fellow up in Johannesburg. Itu is watching us. Bongani Mjigelo Nokolo Mamkize, Lwengu, Abel Pena, Mabefu Jan. There are no comments at this stage, just acknowledging people who are here with us. So, Moza, let's go to break, and then you left the church because you relocated to a place further away from Cape Town. So you left us in 2014 in good peace. Am I right?
I think, Mfundisi, if you remember, is I'd moved to Mama Spiri, and I'd still been commuting every Sunday to come to church. But I think at that time it had come to a place where we were just not able to find each other.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, I think this is where just, I think there was a payment that was supposed to be made, and you needed it to be made right there and then. And I remember I could not be able to do it. And I remember getting this call from you and saying, Moza, I need this payment right now. And I'm like, but I think at that time there was just so many things that were happening. But I think what broke the camel's back, so as to speak, is I think when we're moving towards the being a church that is into criticizing the politics, criticizing government. And I remember one time there was an email that was sent out that we're supposed to do something about Andres Tatan and paint the walls of a way of life, with all of these paintings of Andres Tatan, or the gentleman at Mambush. That's Marikana. Right, Marikana. And I remember at this time I sent an email and I said, Mfundisi, and I remember Mfundisi, this time I couldn't sleep because I kept on asking, are we still a church? Our mandate was to preach the gospel of Christ, but we seem to be this place that is criticizing government, that is going so into politics. Are we still doing what we were supposed to be doing, what we started out? And I remember I sent this email and I said, Mfundisi, we are a church, we are above these politics. Could we find other ways of actually addressing this matter without, And I think that's when, kind of lost it. And I felt good. I could not sleep on Mfundisi. And I felt good. Maybe my time away of life had ended because for me, the purpose was to preach the gospel. And I felt at that time we were not going that direction. But I was so happy that I had left space is right.
It's right. Respectfully.
Cool.
Agreeing to disagree.
Agreeing to disagree, agreeing for this, and that was okay.
And you were not the only one, Moza. I mean, there were others who I remember almost being begged, or I hope she was watching Ubez, Upumeza, Mkonjwana. Mfundisi sinechomi kaloku emsebenzini ezimhlophe man. Can't you preach at least noba kukanye, uyeke nje abantu abamhlophe. I mean, we were at that place. It was a crucible moment for us.
And I tell you what, I think it was never a thing about whether we should not be doing this, but it was the how part that I think we disagreed in. Okay. How should we be doing this? Should this take over, the spiritual aspect, of our journey of, how were we supposed to do this? I think that's where we greatly differed in terms of how, because I remember a lot of people were saying, look, we need to talk about black suffering. We need to address it. We need to advocate for it. But how do we go about doing that without losing this very important part of our lives?
And finally, preach Jesus out of the church, which is next phase we're going to talk about. The next sect is when we began to preach such that Jesus himself decided, I'm not staying here.
No way.
Yeah. Let's go to break, and we have a video that's coming for you, and then we are going to have our coffee. No, Moza?
Yes, sir.
Yeah? All right. Okay. Moza, let me serve you.
Abantu kudala benvalela indlela besithi andiyonto futhi ndiyaboniswa kodwa ingome ngaphakathi kwami ibalisibali lokuwa nokuvuka komntu olonwabo lungapheliyo abantu kudala benvalela indlela besithi andiyonto futhi ndiyaboniswa kodwa ingome ngaphakathi kwami ibalisibali lokuwa nokuvuka komntu nolonwabo lungapheliyo undiyathandaza uyivele ngoma izovuselela umphefumlo wakho ikunike ithemba elisha izovuselela umphefumlo wakho ikunike ithemba elisha kudala usithi nyawo zami ndikhoke undise ukwanhliziyo undise apho kungenjena kudala usithi nyawo nyawo zam ndise awundikhokele undise kwanhliziyo ndise apho kungenjena umphefumlo wami wahlukene awundiyathandaza uyivele ngoma izovuselela umphefumlo wakho yiwunike ithembelisha awundiyathandaza uyivele ngoma izovuselela umphefumlo wakho yiwunike ithembelisha
All right, sibuyile ke breaking, and thank you for staying with us. Konga isilibizwa ngoba Kilombo TV, having our very first series of conversations on the church that ceased to be church. We are here, Moza, Miselwa, Mzanywa, who spent 14 years of her life in this church. And we're looking back now and seeing if we have anything to learn from that history. Let me just quickly read some of the comments that have come through. Konulonwabo apa Xola Skosana, Moza uti kyo, amtsala wam tu kyo. I'm not sure if I was going to survive the transition. Thanks, it happened when I was already out of the Western Cape. And Belinda Magaye Mkhwebi. And you made a significant change in the Christian space.
Amen.
Zenzile Molo. Didn't say anything there. We've got Ulirato. But sometimes Indo Isemduin. Ucho. Yeah, sometimes in Isemduin. I remember one of my neighbors, elder, what Ingaske Sitate Umdana wake, who was not behaving, doing drugs and alcohol. This mother then said, I wish you can take my son and he can become like you, but you guys are playing in that church. You are not holy enough. Itu is giving me too much credit there. I don't think I want to read that. So those are the comments so far.
I think the second comment, Mfundisi, about the lady that says you did so much work. I mean, so many young people, their lives were they really transformed through what we were doing, a way of life. I mean, it was not just the young people, Mfundisi. I think even in the fraternals, you were there preaching this gospel,
When I had my crisis of faith, Moza, sorry to interject, Ngolo Hlobo, but when I could no longer hold Jesus on the one hand and look at the suffering of black people on the other hand, because that's the tension for me.
Yes.
Jesus, black people, and I could no longer keep that in my own journey. So in April of 2016, I came to a place in my life and I said, I'm letting Jesus go. And I look back today to that day, and I know that you could not convince me otherwise. I mean, there are people to this day who would say to me, why didn't you just continue and pretend that you love Jesus? Why didn't you just, that's not me.
Yeah, no.
and so
But that must have been a lonely place for this.
very lonely space. You're talking of being an outcast.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was the chairperson of the Western Cape Religious Leaders Forum at the time, working hand in hand with some of the senior leaders in the church space. I was sold out to the cause of Christ. I believed at that time, at least for 20 years, I believed that the church could be an instrument. But me being me, I could no longer continue. But it was painful. It wreaked havoc. I lost my inner source. I lost the resources within me. My moral compass shifted. I couldn't tell between right and wrong. So I was in a wilderness.
And some of us, I think I'm one of those who said, is he going through a midlife crisis?
Yeah.
You know?
Because I threw out of the window everything that was Christian and everything that was Jesus and everything. I threw it out of the window. So it's been a journey for me, but that's not the conversation. The conversation is, how did that impact? I mean, the last people who walked out of this church, uThembisa Khawulela, no sister wakhe uYandi
Yandisa.
Mahlasela, they held in there for dear life, In fact, I remember uYandi or one of them saying, we don't understand what he's saying, but we love him,
And we don't know where else to go.
And we don't know where else to go. This is where this conversation, I think, has landed now, Moza. The pain that has come out of that. People who lost their home. This was a home who lost their home and found themselves in churches where they could not relate to the message that was coming out of the pulpit. In fact, I remember in one of my angry sermons in the city, Niza umkani yokutya emgomeni. I was very angry when I said that. Xa kuthiwa amazwi ayadala, Moza. I think kuthethwa loo nto leyo. To this very day, there are many of our church family members who have decided to either stay at home because they can't fit in anywhere. You have that experience, Moza?
Hasn't been the same for us. I mean, I've got a home now. Twice in the but
Yeah.
I know it's no longer the same. And I think the reason why it is not the same is it's because a way of life, we had a sense of family, and most importantly, we had a sense of tulendo. So we had a sense of responsibility and ownership towards this thing. And you wanted to make sure we and you have to be there all the time. So now you go to a new place, you have to fit in, you have to find your feet in there. You have to understand the doctrines, you have to, a way of life, we're taught to criticize things, So
we had a roaming mic.
we had a roaming mic where you can actually ask questions during service, So now you're sitting there at church and something is being said and you are always, asking questions, you are always analyzing. Sometimes I would find myself, if it's a way of life, but then obviously you can't do that. The moment you do that, rebellious. And I think a lot of us have not been able to find a home where you can really call your own, and you can't wake up, you can't wait to wake up in the morning on a Saturday, because it was never just about Sunday for us. It was about a time when we had that was available to come in and do whatever needed to be done. It's no longer like that for most of us, and some of us are not going to church. You are very right, you are very correct for this. Some of us are just sitting at home and And some of us have decided to let go, not because we don't believe in Christ anymore, but as you know, in order for us to keep going, we need to congregate and do those things, and most people are not doing that anymore.
Hayikhona indlela Moza yoku avoid the rapture. Could we, hayikhona indlela ba sihlale kula tension permanently. Others continue with Jesus, others give Jesus up, but we remain a family. Hayikhona indlela. I think our pain really goes there. I know now that I was committed to the ideas and may have sacrificed relationships. Is there a time when you say to your, I think if a family is family, you can never disown your brother, your biological brother. Brother wako, noba anivani, noba aniboni ngasonye. You can never disown your family. But we came to that place.
Fancy, you're asking a very important question. Could we have been able to
hold Jesus on the
hold
one hand
Jesus
and reject Jesus at the same time and be a family?
I'm not able to answer that. I'm not able to answer that at all.
Because some members of our family were holding on to Jesus, and some members of our family were rejecting Jesus.
I think even now there are people who work with that tension. I think you cannot be a critical thinker and not be able to find yourself in that space where while you love Jesus so much and yet at the very same time, you reject some of the things that are happening when you see the suffering of black people. It happens, I think, to many and to most of us.
So we did not survive that transition.
We never survived. We were not able to survive that. Of course, at that time, I had already left.
You had already left.
I had already left at that time. And I think it's going to bring us back to a situation where we actually tried to
5 years later.
Not necessarily then, Mfunswam. I think we tried to see if we can't restart this. But I think at that time, most of us were filled with emotions. When something ends, Mfundis, and there's no opportunity to actually talk about this.
Yeah.
So people are left there, they are bitter, they're disgruntled. And I think we approached you and we said, look, Mfundis, let's come and discuss this way forward.
Yeah.
And I think for all of us, we're sitting with this inner anger, we finding ourselves out of Nkonzo, and there's not been a kind of a transition out of this thing, if there could be one. It's sort of, I don't know whether you remember that time, Francois.
Yeah. I have memories of those meetings we had. I remember saying, Moza, I enjoy my Sunday now. I don't have to wake up after 30 years. I'm at home, I'm listening to Metro. But if I must come here for you, I think I said that in that meeting, to save us as a family, I will come back here and sit here. You do your singing and your gospel things and dancing, but I cannot let you take over the pulpit. I'm the one responsible for the interpretation of Scripture. And I think this is where we did not see eye to eye.
No,
if I got you correctly that time, you said, no, just give us the place. And I said my response was, but Kilombo is the highest stage in the evolution of way of life. The vision continues. Mm-hmm. We're serving our people in this community. So I cannot let us have two visions in one
going in one
home.
Place.
But could we have done it differently, Moza?
I think at that time, because I think emotions were heightened at that time. I think people were really, really angry, as I'm saying. And I think also at the very same time, and he asked them, transition, and I think there were a lot of other things that came in that should have never come in, While we're trying to make these discussions, I think there were a lot of stories that were being told people coming in and looking and checking what is happening into the space. I remember people were saying that, you know,
This place is being sold, those kinds of
not,
rumors.
well, this place is being sold and that it's for your own personal gain. But most importantly, we wanted to have a discussion around that. But I think what happened is, as that discussion, zabulawa into yoba, I think abanye abantu were not necessarily wanting these discussions to happen for the same reasons that we wanted them to happen. I don't know whether when we disagree about something, siyasifuna ukulwa immediately. You know, we don't want to sit and actually talk about these things. And in that space, you would find that there would be people that would instigate. I mean, there were lies that were said about my husband coming in here, coming to look at this space. There were lies being said about me coming in to convince someone, like going in door to door. You know, I remember that, and there were some of the personal things that were said to people, and then
War is ugly.
and then it was all ugly, Mfundisi, you know, and but then I remember, you know, the one thing that was important was that, guys, senior relationships up. If we are going to find ourselves in a space apho kuzawuliwa, asizokulwa thina, asikwazi ukulwa, besingazange azolwa kwaseqaleni. Besifuna uthetha thina olwa hlobo umfundisi wayesifundise ngalo. Because you had always taught us to sit in the table and talk about these things, and to actually really probe and question them.
Yeah.
You know, and at that time there was no room for that. You know, it was closed, totally closed, and we realized ukuthi if kuthethwa ngento zokulwa asizokwazi thina ukulwa, because that's not what we want to do. And also at the very same time,
There was an attempt, though, Moza. I mean, there was an attempt to talk, I think. I mean, at least we had 2 sessions where we tried to.
Yes, we did have
And unfortunately, the space became toxic.
very toxic.
And disrespectful.
Absolutely.
And so a line had to be drawn.
A line had to be drawn from this. There was no way we could have been able to go on at that time. And I also think that, I think we were not getting each other in terms of what one what was saying, you know? Because at one time it felt as though we were fighting Kilombo, but we're not fighting Kilombo, you know? What we were saying is that we still want to worship. How do we find a space where we can still be able to do the worship? You know, but then, like I said, I think lando yamosha kakhulu ngabantu abangenelelayo, you know, maybe with their own motives, esingazaziyo ke thina ngoku, you know, nangela xesha sasingazazi. But for me, what was important at that time was that let us not say a word that is going to end up getting ishiye inhliziyo yomnye umuntu that we regard as umzalwane and a sister and a brother. Ngomso afilisha into wathetha lento wena kum. Because at the end of the day, we knew ukuthi we were all family. Whether omnye uphume ngapha omnye waphuma ngapha, at the end of the day, sonke sasiyifamily. So we chose to keep quiet and not respond to any of the things that were being, some of them were not true, that were things that were being said. And we decided we were not going to do that. And it was, I think from this again, Diavue, that you took the courage 5 years later to start these conversations. Because I want to think that abantu ngoku, that anger has actually died out.
Yeah.
The dust has definitely settled. I think people have got a much more sober mind to be able to sit and talk about these things and actually reflect and say, like you are saying, what can I take from that? You know, what can I move? I mean, from me,
And we have children, Moza, who are going to grow up and hear these stories.
Absolutely.
And wonder if we should have done things differently.
For instance, we're currently sitting in a country where people are not able to resolve things in an amicable way. And I think that it's important for Uba Singer to play into those things. We must find better ways of resolving the issues that we have. And in as far as the way of life is concerned, and Ikilombo, I think from where I'm sitting from this, maybe some people will never come back. But I think what is important is that we must be able to take back from the love and say, even if izinto zihambanga ngola hlobo besifuna zihambe ngalo, even if there is no church that is taking place in this space anymore, but I see we are not enemies. We are not enemies. You know, I think that's what's important.
Yeah, Moza, let me perhaps share my last thought, and I'll give it to you. We'll read, if there are any responses here. What I imagine in my mind is that this place represents an intersection where our lives, connected.
Yes.
And some of those connections were so deep. And we stayed longer in that. There are people who came to this church for a year and left and will still say, that's my home. That's
Absolutely.
just for a year.
Absolutely.
Others stayed for, like you, 14 years. But we were all in this intersection. It was deep. It was black in every respect.
Absolutely.
And it grew. Maybe we did not grow with it. I don't know. I'll be happy to hear how other members of the family are surviving out there. I'm looking forward to meet more and more. And maybe we can even have a reunion of sorts. Sihlambane, siphululane amanxeba. Ngexesha yazi nifuna into enye Moza, but nifune ngendlela ezingafaniyo nide nibulalane.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think we almost got to that place.
We almost got to that place when we've always been preaching that we can always find different ways. But then we found ourselves in that space where we just couldn't, Mfundisi. And it was a lonely place, it was a sad place.
Yeah.
A lot of things were said that should have never been said.
And the thing is, we lost support of each other. Abantu basalusa abantwana, abantu basanida support xa besolekelwe, abantu basanida support xa bechatana, baxachatisayo. Life is tough. And for some of us, it was the only support system.
For most of us, it was the only support system for this.
But is it impossible for black people to gather not on the basis of their shared idea about God, but on the basis that they are a family, that they are black? And therefore, they are committed to each other like any family who may have different opinions about different things, but they remain a family. Is that possible?
It could never be possible for this. I don't think we need to just open up our hearts and be able to tolerate each other and also be able to understand that we don't all see things the same way. The lens that you are wearing give you that picture.
Yeah.
The lens that I'm wearing will give me a different picture to the one that you are seeing. But it is okay. We can always move together. At the end of the day, if way of life, we're family. At the end of the day, sakhula apa singamantwana sibancinci. Some of us I found my passion here and my purpose. I found it right in this place.
And you called me the other day, you were so excited.
Absolutely.
You're a team leader or something in some...
No, I'm not a
what
team
was
leader.
That thing?
No, I'm a facilitator for this. I work with young people. But that's where it all started. I started doing that here, and I never knew that I am that kind of person, that can interact with young people and begin to change their lives. And many other people have got great stories about the teachings that they got here that have shaped their lives everywhere else. And we need to find ourselves in a space where we say, we're not agreeing on many things, but we still are one, and we're still a family. We can still pick up the call and actually say, look, let's have a good time together. You know, we are no enemies. Akukho nto ibuhlungu mfundisi into yoba xana sidibana sibe sasingabazalwane kubekho la tension isenza into yoba singakwazi ukukhawulelana kungabikho nzima. You know, we need to find a space where when we see each other, you know, we are able to reminisce on those memories and we are able to walk together. And I think it's important to find ourselves in that space. And of course, Mfundisi, I'm going to be honest and say this here. I know that the issue of this structure still becomes a bit of an issue, you know. And I think even that, it's something that we can sit and we talk about. If we disagree, we still disagree. But what is important is we know enemies. We cannot be enemies.
There are no-go areas in our conversation, shouldn't be.
There should never be no-go areas, Mfundisi, you know. And we have a burden. Singabantu abamnyama sokungavani asivani. I remember mfundisi ufika kwami aba wawungena kuzo zonke inkonzo. Sasiye ungena siye naseHarare siya everywhere. Sisithi singabantu abamnyama.
Once a month we would visit
Absolutely.
a local church.
There is no need for us into yoba singavani. Singabantu abamnyama sonke. And I think in this context yalapha way of life sonke i-background yethu iyalapha way of life.
Yeah, we love
Irrespective.
others.
Absolutely.
And we couldn't love each other when
it was important.
It mattered the most.
It mattered the most for us to love each other at that time. And we were never able to do that. And I think we need to just go back there and say, at the end of the day, singabalapha way of life. Whether way now you want to go this way or you are allowed to, because that is your right. But not at my expense at the very same time. Let's move together. Find a way. I do not know, I don't have the answers.
Jesus divides. It says, I will come and mama nomntana bayahlukana, the mother-in-law. I mean, Jesus divides. Jesus divides black people and he divided us.
We can still find each other. We still are black. We still can find each other. We still are suffering. We all are still going through the very same types of suffering. We have the same struggles.
Okay, well, Moza, I do not know. Let me read what our viewers are saying, and then I'm not sure what I'm doing right or wrong. I keep looking for these comments, looking at the wrong place, I guess, or what? Okay. Where am I? Where should I be going? All right, so I guess Moza, the journey has begun. We must consider ourselves lucky that we are sitting here after that whirlwind, because what we went through, Melba City and you know. So I hope this will be the beginning of our healing. I hope so. And we are all growing, you know. What is your last take, Moza?
I think, most importantly, I'm grateful for this, that you've invited me to be here today. And just think back about a time in my life that changed everything. A place that I could never find anywhere. Ayikho enye indawo iway of life endazo ndiyifumane khona. I don't even think ikhona indawo ezimfundiso ndazifumana apha endawo zendiphinde ndiyifumane khona ngoku. Whatever I've learned here ngoku, I'm just building, you know, on what I learned here in my life. So ndiyayibulela kakhulu loo nto leyo mfundisi. And I am really hoping that this is not just about sitting here and, you know, having this conversation, but even outside of this, we'll be able to have these conversations and be able to move. I mean, you know, yeah. I do not know how, but I think at the base of it it's the love and the...
We don't always have to have the answers, but if we have the commitment and the intention,
and the ability to regulate.
We might get somewhere.
and the ability to regulate our feelings and our emotions, Mfundisi. You know, I think that's another thing we lost during that time. We were not able to regulate our feelings in such a way that nokuba sele ndisutywe ngumsindo ndikwazi ukuzithoba and say, what is the end goal at the end of the day? Where are we trying to get it? And I think it's important as a black people to be able to do that.
Moza, we have somebody on the floor who would want to make a comment, then we'll come back and close.
Molweni babukeli, molweni mfundisi, molo nawe Moza, molo ne-team behind i-cameras. Ndivuyile ufumana elithuba to be part of le dliwano-ndlebe. Nam ndizawungqina kakhulu kwinto enithe nazinyathela apha. Ibe lixesha elibuhlungu ukuphela kwenkonzo. I remember mna personally I couldn't sleep and my husband ebengayopati yenkonzo. I couldn't share naye ezi ndaba. I was awake the whole night thinking where to go from ngoku. I'm raising my children and then ndibone i-future. And andifuna ukukhala. Even now I'm ndinesikhalo. Abantwana bam are still crying for the church. Abafuni kundilandela and bazi boys. I tried to force them, but abafiti. But mna ndanyanzela ukufika because I know a personal relationship noThixo, and I'm still trusting uThixo ngabo. I know uThixo umfundisi wasifundisa uba ukuthi akamxhalelanga umuntu ngoThixo, ukuthi I will continue ijourney ndihamba noThixo, even though a way of life is no more to cater for abantwana bam, because that time yayisokhiwa. Ndandi excited ndibona into eyenzayo to young people, because a way of life I think is the only church umuntu omtsha ofitayo and amoldeke. I'm sorry for being emotional, but imeko endikuyo. Because ndithe xa ndiphuma apha I try ndibanyanzela ndibahogrisa into yoba you need to go and ube senkonzweni, but khange bafite abantwana bam. But ke I'm trusting uThixo ngabo nexesha nemfundiso endizifumene kule ndawo ukuthi kuzoba right, kuzoba right. Because ke umfundisi wasifundisa ukuthemba uThixo. That is why singakhange simlahle xa yena eba kwenye ijeni, because he taught us to be firm nokuba nobudlelwane noThixo. That is why ke I was kwi-stand sokuma, because zange asifundise ukulandela yena as a person, but wasixhobisa, wasinika the true gospel. Ndize apha ndi-grateful mfundisi, ndinento ethi noba kuthethwa bad ngawa I become mad, because I know in umuntu onguye. It umfundisi has never been a fake and akayo fake even nangoku. Kulaa jeni akuyo ukuyo manyani. He's not faking anyone. He's himself and ndithembe uThixo ngaye. Thank you.
Wow.
She just missed it for me.
Yeah. Oh, Mamulu said.
Yeah, she just missed it for me.
Yeah, Mamulu said. You know, she used to come to my office, Cecil Resource Center. I will clean up here. Always reliable, always dependable. Oh, tunugile ke ngoku. Kodwa ke Moza ndicinga uba ke if ayikho enye into masi enze ilizwi lombulelo to our technical team. This was made possible by everybody who has worked behind the scenes. And so we want to just express our gratitude. This conversation continues. We'll try and have it as on a weekly basis. We already have members of our church who have raised their hands, who are saying, I'm next. I want to tell my own story. I want to share my experience, life outside of way of life. And so hopefully we'll learn something too. Yeah, but Moza, you could not have been, it could not have been any better to have you here. You represent, you represent the sentiments of many, many of our people. And so I'm eternally grateful. What media is made this possible, and we will go on this journey together. Thank you to everybody.
Mam Lucid, this could have been better. What can we tell you, Mosha Fonswam?